Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about the Superman family, Lex Luthor, his battle armor, and the planet where Lex is the hero and Superman's the villain. But before we get into it, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment. It helps us out with the YouTube algorithm, and we love hearing from you guys. We've got an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. With all that said, let's dive in. Prologue to this one takes place in 1964 when a regularly scheduled Western TV show is interrupted. A black and white image of Lex Luthor greets all of America. He says that Superman has never dared to face Luthor man to man. Luthor challenges Superman to a fight, which, according to Luthor, would be a fair fight for once, a fight where Superman doesn't have his powers to help him. Superman sees the broadcast and accepts the challenge. So, using his super intelligence and super speed, Superman builds a suitable spacecraft, and he and Luthor fly to a planet which at this point has no name yet. Here, under the red sun, they box, and Lex Luthor is knocked out. Superman returns to the ship and gets some water, but when he returns to where Luthor was, Superman only sees footprints. So, under the red sun, Superman starts following the footprints when suddenly a horrible sandstorm kicks up. Superman wraps his cape around his face and head, trying to shield himself as he struggles to find shelter. Luthor, meanwhile, hunkers down in a cave and thinks to himself that the storm is going to finish off Superman, and it's going to be Luthor who buries the Man of Steel. As Luthor fantasizes, Superman walks until he feels pavement under his feet. He's walked into some sort of alien city, and for a moment he gets his hopes up that there's going to be water here. But sadly, the city is in ruins and is ancient and devoid of water. The storm eventually ends, and Luthor leaves his cave, setting forth to continue his search for Superman. But fate leads Luthor in a different direction to a different city where, to his surprise, the aliens here look just like humans. Just as on the planet Krypton, the aliens there also looked like humans. Here, there are ancient machines used to pump water to the surface of this desert world. But the people here were so pampered by their alien technology that after several generations, they had no idea how to repair it anymore. So when the machines eventually quit working, their society fell into ruin. Just then, some birds of prey attack, and Luthor uses his gadgetry skills on the machinery here, then sprays the birds with water, chasing them away. And everybody here is in everybody here is in awe of Luthor's abilities that he can actually repair the machines. So now that they have water again on this world, Lex Luthor is the hero. Luthor finds another machine in what seems to be an ancient library of some sort. So he activates it. And this gadget is sort of like their version of a universal translator. It grants the user the comprehend languages power with a limitation that they only understand the native language here. But that's enough. No longer impeded by the language barrier, Luthor repairs construction equipment and helps the people here begin to take back their homeworld. Thanks to Luthor, the people get their water and name the planet Lexor in honor of him. But Superman ultimately finds Luthor, beats him in another duel, and Lex is taken to prison on Earth. One day, Superman comes to visit Lex and he hands Luthor a photograph that Superman took through a telescope. It's a photo of a statue the Lexorians erected of Luthor, the man who saved them. Superman urges Lex Luthor to consider serving his term, and maybe he might be released early for good behavior. And if so, maybe he could live on Lexor where everybody loves him. Then we get to the main plot, which takes place almost 20 years later in 1983, when the Man of Steel and the aging Lex Luthor have yet another battle. But this time, a nearby emergency forces Superman to leave right before Luthor loses consciousness. Before he passes out, Luthor engages the damaged autopilot controls, and the spacecraft he's in flies off into deep space. Luthor blacks out. Traveling at warp speed, Luthor's ship travels many light years in a matter of days until finally it reaches Lexor, where, thanks to him repairing the automated construction equipment, their civilization has been restored to its former glory. A Lexorian tractor beam locks onto Luthor's ship and guides it safely to a landing, where a beautiful brown haired Lexorian woman named Ardora says maybe it's him, and she and another Lexorian named Nogu approach Luthor's spacecraft. Nogu says every time an unidentified spacecraft finds its way to Lexor, you are besieged by disappointment and despair when these space wanderers so rarely turn out to be him. Ardora says, he visits me as often as he is able, Nogu. I have resigned myself to the fact that partial happiness is far better than none. The airlock opens and they find Lex Luthor still unconscious at the controls. Ardora says, it's him. My beloved husband has once again journeyed across half a galaxy to be at my side. He appears to be injured. We must take him to the healing center at once. Back on Earth, Superman searches for Luthor, and while he can't find the man himself, he does find the expansive headquarters that Luthor's spacecraft was launched from. Superman uses super speed to smash the headquarters and everything in it so that if Luthor does return, he can't use any of this stuff to hurt anyone. After doing that, Superman continues his search elsewhere. Back on Lexor, Luthor wakes up and his wife, Ardora, says there's someone who wants to meet him. She brings in a young red-haired boy named Lex Luthor Jr. Lex is shocked. He tells Ardora that if only he had known, he would have come at once. Lex promises that from this day forward, he'll be a new man. He'll abandon his never-ending war against Superman, and he will stay on Lexor with his family. For the first time, Lex Luthor feels like he's wasted his life, and he truly wants to put his past behind him. Outside, the Lexorians cheer that their hero has returned once more. So he walks out onto a balcony and promises that this time he'll stay here and that he was a fool to cling to his native planet, when clearly this place is where he belongs. Days pass. Luthor uses his scientific skills to improve the lives of the Lexorians. Time is spent with his wife, who he tells all of his darkest secrets and regrets to, and she forgives him for all of it. And perhaps even more importantly, time is spent between father and son. And now, Lex Luthor Jr. is the most important thing in the old man's life. But one day, as Lex is standing on the ground outside of the city, there's a cave in, and Lex discovers an ancient lab. And it is here that Lex finds ancient alien weapons that are actually capable of finally destroying the Man of Steel. Back on Earth, one of the robots from Luthor's expansive headquarters managed to survive long enough to launch a satellite, which erects a force field over Metropolis. Superman breaks through the force field, throws the satellite in the sun, and figures out where Lex Luthor is. So Superman heads for the planet Lexor. Meanwhile, on Lexor, Luthor comes to the shocking realization that his world is about to be destroyed in a similar fashion to the way that Krypton was destroyed. Apparently, there's some sort of a buildup of energy at the planet's core. So Luthor builds a gadget that looks sort of like a massive green pole. The gadget has energy absorption, and whatever energy goes in one end comes out the other. As such, The energy buildup in the planet's core is absorbed by the pole, travels up through the mantle and crust, and then is shot out harmlessly into space. So once again, Lex Luthor has saved this world. Then one day, while Lex is talking with the other leaders of Lexorian society, one of them points and says, "Look, up in the sky." And this is, of course, Superman. Lex Luthor says, "I'm impressed, old foe. Here you are, making a nuisance of yourself under Lexor's red sun, with all of your powers intact. I presume it's some sort of ultra-reflective liquid sunscreen shielding your body from the red solar rays and thus preserving your powers?" Superman grabs Luthor by the collar and drags him away, saying, "An extremely accurate guess, Luthor. Care to venture another guess about the fate of the lethal satellite you left over Metropolis?" As they're flying upwards and back towards Earth, Lex says, "Why the hurry, Kryptonian? Unless you're worried that the red sunscreen of yours might wear off before you're out of range of Lexor's sun?" Superman retorts, "You never did know when to be quiet, Luthor." Just then, a Lexorian sniper shoots Superman and he drops Luthor. Luthor sees this and knows that on Earth, that blast wouldn't have done this much damage. So Lex concludes that the red sunscreen has already started to fade and that Superman's APs of powers have already begun to drop. Luthor subs an Omni gadget for flight, and a small rocket device on his hips allows him to fly inside of a nearby mountain through a large crack. Superman moves in that direction, but the side of the mountain explodes outwards, and Lex Luthor emerges in the in the Lexor battlesuit, which, by the way, has a dexterity of 22, a strength of 26, and a body of 26. That's its first incarnation, the first appearance, which is this issue. And based on how it functioned in Action Comics issue 544, we decided the best way to interpret Superman's power loss was to cut all of his numbers in half. So that makes Superman's current stats dexterity 13, strength 25, body 20. So we roll initiative, and Lex Luthor gets to go first. And based on the above mentioned stats, Lex needs to roll a 5 or better to hit. So he rolls a 7 and a 2, which does hit, but earns no column shifts. So Lex Luthor's purple metal gauntlet strikes Superman in the face, and the Man of Steel takes 10 points of damage, and he's knocked backwards for a quarter of a mile. On Superman's turn, he uses a communicator. Thanks to quantum entanglement, his communicator is tied to the supercomputer in the Fortress of Solitude, and he has instantaneous communication with it regardless of range. So Superman summons the Superman family to aid him. Then for his dice action, Superman tries using a 15 AP blast of heat vision. He needs to roll an 18 or better to hit Lex, but Superman rolls a 7 and a 3, which is a miss. The red beam misses Luthor and travels off harmlessly into space. On Luthor's turn, he needs to roll a 5 or better to hit. He rolls a 5 and a 1, which hits, doing another 10 points of damage, so Superman is knocked out. The Lexorians cheer as their champion finally defeated the Man of Steel. Lex thinks about ending Superman once and for all, but after half a century of fighting him, Lex knows that Superman has the invulnerability power. That is, until his powers totally wear off in a few minutes. Then he'll be powerless. And then Luthor can finally kill Superman. So Luthor throws up his arms for now, and people cheer. Meanwhile, on the planet Earth, the Superman family is notified by the supercomputer that Superman needs help. So Barbara Briggs, the brunette Superwoman, Kristen Wells, the red-haired Superwoman, Lisa Jennings, the black-haired Superwoman, and Lucy Lane Olson, the blonde-haired Superwoman, fly to Lexor. We used the first edition DC Heroes stats, by the way, for Kara Zor-El, to represent all of these characters except for Kristen Wells. She has completely different stats. And as before, by the way, we cut their numbers in half due to the red sun and the limitations of that sunscreen gadget that they're using. So we roll initiative again, and Lex Luthor goes first again, and he attacks the first of the super women, which is the one with brown hair. So he rolls double nines and then an 8 and a 10 for a grand total of 36, which is 8 column shifts. So Barbara takes 25 points of damage and her body drops from 18 to -7. Lex Luthor then attacks again, rolling double nines again, then double twos, then an 8 and a 6, which again is a total of 36, which does again 25 points of damage. So the brunette Superwoman has now a body of -32. And with her numbers cut in half, that means she has 22 APs of invulnerability. So for her to get back up in the positive, she needs to roll her 22 versus the 32 points that she's in the hole, right? Which means she has to roll an 18 or higher on two 10-sided dice. She rolls a 1 and a 3. So the brown-haired Superwoman dies. Lisa Jennings, who's her best friend, spends an automatic action yelling, "No!" having just witnessed Barb's life ended at the hands of Lex Luthor. So Lisa attacks Luthor, rolling a 6 and an 8, which unfortunately is a miss. She needs to roll an 18 or higher. And since she already used an automatic action, screaming, she doesn't get another attack. Lucy tries to hit Luthor. She needs an 18 too, but she rolls a 6 and a 3, so she too misses. And she had to move to get over to where Lex is standing, so now she's out of actions too. Kristen Wells attacks, and she only has a dexterity of 6. So she has to roll a 32 or better to even hit Lex Luthor. She rolls double fours and then a 5 and a 7, which is a cool roll, but still doesn't get the job done. Kristen does, however, have a 30 AP force field, which means she might actually survive this. She spends her remaining automatic actions trying to taunt Lex into focusing on her, since she has the most APs there with that force field, but it doesn't work. Lex rolls a 9 and an 8, which hits Lisa Jennings for 2 column shifts. So Lisa's body drops from 18 to 2. Then he rolls a 1 and a 10, which hits but earns no column shifts. So now Lisa's body drops from a 1 to -11. Lisa has 22 APs of invulnerability, so for her to get back into the positives, she has to roll her 22 versus the 11 points she's in the hole. So she needs to roll a 4 or higher on 2d10. She rolls a 1 and an 8, so her invulnerability kicks in, and Lisa gets 13 hit points back. So now her body is 2 points in the positives, so she's awake again. So now it's the girl's turn. Lisa strikes back, rolling double fours, then an 8 and a 10 for a total of 26, which is 5 column shifts. So she does 13 points of damage to the Lexor battlesuit. Lisa swings again, rolling a 3 and a 6, which is a miss. Lucy goes. She also rolls a 3 and a 6, missing. She tries again and gets a 5 and a 2, which is another miss. Kristen Wells attacks, rolling a 10 and a 1, which is a miss. Kristen spends her automatic actions taunting Lex, trying to get his attention, but it doesn't work. At this point in the adventure, the players asked where Superman Red was at. I said I was worried that I overused him and that people were sick of him saving the day. But everyone thought this looked like the makings of a total party kill. And they said Superman Red is for sure a member of the Superman family, and they wanted all the help they could get. So at this point, I brought in the Supermobile, piloted by Superman Red. And we said that he was late getting here because he had to go get the Supermobile. And while a lot of people hate the Supermobile, I love it for a multitude of reasons. One of which is that it is totally shielded from kryptonite and red sun radiation. So the Supermobile enters the fight, and it has a dex of 24, a strength of 48, and a body of 45. So Red attacks Lex Luthor, rolling an 8 and a 5, which earns him 1 column shift. So Lex Luthor's battle suit takes 26 points of damage and it quits working. It just completely goes dead. Which brings us to our epilogue. Lisa Jennings drags Lex Luthor out of his power armor, and without it, Lex Luthor has a dex of 4 and a body of 4. So Lisa Jennings just starts beating him, and she says this was for Barb. So Lex Luthor is knocked out. Power Girl, who arrived with her husband, Superman Red, runs over to her cousin, which is of course Superman Blue, Clark Kent, and she subs an Omni gadget for regeneration usable on others. So the Superman family returns to Earth, and Lex Luthor returns to prison. A funeral is held for the brown-haired Superwoman, and she leaves behind one son. For those who either don't remember or maybe never caught that episode, Brainiac had abducted the 4 Superwomen, and all of them except for Lucy were given DNA that Brainiac had extracted from Superman. So 3 of them became pregnant as a result. So Barbara's son is Superman's son, technically. And up until now, Superman hasn't really had much contact with him. But now, given the new situation, Chris is taken to Kansas to the Kent farm, where his biological father now begins to raise him. What nobody yet realizes, though, is the Phantom Zoners smuggled a piece of jewel kryptonite into the Phantom Zone the last time they were captured. And Chris is possessed by a Phantom Zoner named Lor Zod, who is the son of Zod. And all of the rage that he feels for Lex Luthor having killed his mother awakens Lor Zod within him, right? So things are about to go very wrong. But that's a story for another day. This adventure was based on Action Comics issue number 544, and it starts off pretty much the exact same way, but maybe around halfway or 3/4 the way through the story, Lex Luthor started committing crimes in the Lexor battlesuit, in the comic, I mean, which made no sense to me. Um, in the Superman Red / Superman Blue story from the comics, pre-Crisis comics, they do mention that Luthor was driven insane due to chemical fumes when he was young, so I guess insanity is maybe why Luthor would attack his own people. But just for me and my personal preferences, I felt like the story would work a lot better if Luthor really did turn over a new leaf until Superman showed up and things went wrong. So, anyways, in the comic book version of things, a stray energy blast hit that big green pole that goes down to the planet's core, and Luthor's world is destroyed along with his family, which I don't like. I was willing to let it happen in this adventure if it just happened naturally. If it happened because of where people were on the map and what was rolled with the dice, I decided to let the dice fall where they may. But I didn't like I think it's way more interesting for them to be alive. And in this game, all the players were sticking with their fists rather than energy blasts for the most part because their fists just do more damage. So I thought it was interesting that unlike in the classic comics, in our world, Lexor exists. His wife Ardora still exists, and in my opinion, most of all, Lex Luthor Jr. still exists, and he's probably not very happy with the Superman family right about now. So I thought that was interesting. Hopefully you did too. If so, as always, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll catch you in the next adventure.